What's up, guys? What's up, guys? Welcome back to another physical education episode. This is episode 6 and episode 6 of physical education PE periods with Onimesh. I am Onimesh, and today we're going to continue our discussion on a different topic but with the same overarching theme that you should, what we talked about in the last episode, that you should understand that there's value in grasping and understanding concepts over specific answers, because in the field of health and fitness what you get is a lot of specific answers to a lot of different things. And the problem with answers over concepts is that concepts is a grander, when somebody gives you a concept, you can do a lot of things with that concept. You can take it and you can apply it in a lot of different places, and you can choose what you want to do with that concept. But if all you get is a specific answer to something, then you can't really do anything with that, except for accepting the answer as fact or not accepting the answer as fact. For example, yesterday we talked about calcium metabolism, and the discussion kind of like was about, if let's say somebody says that this is the amount of calcium that you need in a day, then you're getting a very specific answer, right? All you can do with that is accept that as fact or not accept that as fact. What we did in yesterday's episode was that we forgot about that question for a while, that specific question of how much calcium should you consume in a day. And we talked about bone health and what helps you maintain bone health, what helps you maintain your calcium metabolism inside the body, and how that happens, and how these different concepts of how sunlight is helpful for that. So we discussed the concept and we prioritized that over a very specific answer, right? And now that you guys have that concept, you can take that concept and you can apply it anywhere. You can understand that it's not just important to know how much calcium needs to go into the body. It's important to know whether that calcium is being absorbed or not, and what helps with that absorption of calcium, which at the end of the day is going to help you with your bone health and bone metabolism, right? So that's the same thing for today. We're going to understand why prioritizing concepts over specific answers is important. And the question that we have today is a question that I've been asked a lot. In fact, I was asked this question today, and that is basically, at what age should kids start training or physical education in general, right? Because training is a part of physical education, and which is a bigger paradigm. Physical education is a bigger paradigm of which training is a part. So at what age should kids start physical education? And if you see this whiteboard right here, which I've prepared for you guys, let's say we have this question of at what age should kids start physical education. That again, you got to understand that it's a very specific question, right? It's a very specific question. The answer to that will be an age, right? It will be a number. Somebody is going to tell you 14, depending on where they got their specific answer from. They're going to say 14, 15, 18, 19, right? And then you can't really do anything with that answer. You can either accept that as fact or not accept that as fact, right? That's all you can do with it. So what we're going to do in today's episode is all of this. We're going to forget about this thing right here, because it's a specific question to which you only get a specific answer. And instead of finding the answer to at what age should we start, we're just going to simply understand why should anybody, not just kids, why should any human or any person invest time and effort and money in physical education, right? Which basically is a concept that you can apply. If you understand this concept, you can apply it anywhere. If you understand this concept, you won't have the need for knowing at what age should anybody start, because you will know why should anybody start, right? And the reason for it is very simple, and that's what we are going to get started with. Why should anybody do PE? First of all, it affords you the opportunity for adaptations that's going to help you with a bunch of things that we'll discuss in a minute. But what does this mean? What does this mean that physical education affords you the opportunities with various things, right? Now, I feel like ecology does this really well, where they help you understand and visualize the concept of, looking at people as systems, looking at people and their surroundings as systems, right? As a system where there's an interaction happening between the person, between the entity that we're looking at and the things in the entity's immediate surroundings, right? And we look at that interaction, and that's basically ecology. We're looking at an ecosystem. And I think like a very watered down version of this should be a foundational concept in physical education that should be taught to every single kid in school, wherein you need to get them to get a piece of paper and draw a silhouette, and then draw a bigger bigger shape around that silhouette. Now, and help them understand and help them visualize that this is their ecosystem. They need to start understanding and identifying, with that ecosystem. Let them draw, let them be creative, let them draw the silhouette however they want that silhouette is of themselves. Let them view themselves and be creative and draw themselves however they view themselves, and then draw a bigger shape. Now this shape can be any shape, it can be a triangle, it can be a square, circle, doesn't matter. What is important here is that, again, the specifics do not matter. What is important here is that kids need to start grasping the concept of looking at themselves, you know looking at themselves as individuals in their immediate surroundings, and their themselves as interacting with different things in their immediate surroundings. Because that's a very important part of being human. That's a very important part of human nature, and that is, humans are adaptive creatures, right? We are always adapting. To grow in life, we have to adapt to different things. Now, what do we adapt to? We adapt to different entities, different triggers, different stimuli in our immediate surroundings. So once you start understanding the system, start drawing and visualizing the system, now you can start putting things in the system and viewing how that works. If you do not understand what's happening, I'll explain this to you in very simple words. It's completely fine. It takes a while. But my point being that humans are very adaptive creatures by nature, right? We adapt to things in our surroundings. So let's do a thought experiment. Let's do a quick exercise of doing it right here. We're going to imagine a kid. Let's name it A. It feels very weird to name kids A and B. So let's say we have two kids, right? We're going to draw the ecosystem for one kid on one side. We're going to draw the ecosystem for the other kid on the other side, right? Now let's start filling up the ecosystem for the first kid with a whole bunch of things. Let's say this kid has a very physical education rich experience. This kid is exposed to all kinds of playground activities, all kinds of swings and stairs to climb, rocks to throw, crawling, running, lots of running on grass, running on roads, competitions, races, and all of these things. So let's start filling up the ecosystem. Let's start filling up the immediate surroundings of this kid with all of these things, right? And let's take another kid, and let's say this kid is deprived, or this kid hasn't had that experience in his lifetime. And let's say, so we're going to take this ecosystem and we're going to leave it blank, right? There's obviously going to be other things that ecosystem that might positively or negatively affect the kid's growth and adaptation, but let's not complicate things like that. Let's just stick to physical education and why physical education is important for everybody. So we're going to draw a whole bunch of things in the first kid's ecosystem, and in the second kid's ecosystem, we're just going to leave it blank. So this basically signifies that the first kid has had an experience where, they've been exposed to all these kinds of activities, right? And the second kid has not. Now, what is going to be the difference between these two? That's what I want you guys to think about. And that's where basically the human nature, the adaptive nature of human comes in. When you fill up a kid's immediate ecosystem, like immediate surroundings, with all of these things, right? Playground activities, competitions, games, outdoor activities, crawling, running, jumping, and all of these things. You can put whatever you want in there. When that organism is exposed to all of these things, they're going to adapt to all of these things, right? They're going to make adaptations, and they're going to grow as a result of that adaptation. And the difference in between this kid and the other kid that has not had this experience, that has not had this exposure, is going to be that this kid is not going to adapt to these things. Now, what's the difference between somebody who has adapted to all of these things and a kid who has not adapted to all of these things? The number one difference between these things, what I've written down here, is that, physical education, basically it's going to be a curriculum where, you're basically doing this, you're filling up the ecosystem, immediate surroundings of the kid with all of these activities where the kid is, they're running, they're climbing, they're playing, crawling, competing, learning different skills, doing different things with the body. If you go to my Instagram page, look at the videos, that's all we do, right? I call a lot of those activities as layer 1 activities, where the kids are getting a chance to express themselves, be exuberant, and do things with their physical abilities, right? So we make use of a lot of playground equipment like slides and jungle gyms and whatnot, because they afford us the opportunity to, when you climb on a jungle gym, it's a very engaging activity. It affords the opportunity to learn a new kind of movement, to do different things with your body. Same goes when you do, you do a whole variety of things. When you crawl, run, and do all of these things, it's easily understandable that the environment of the first, let's say, environment of one kid that has not had exposure to all of these things, and the environment of the other kid that has had exposure to all of these things, it's pretty easy to understand what the difference is going to be. And well, let's just name it down. The difference that's going to that's going to exist for these. First of all, the important, what is going to happen. I'm losing track of my thoughts here because I'm just looking at this board and going anyway. So when a kid has been exposed to all of these things, when we place these activities in the ecosystem, in the immediate surroundings of a kid in their foundational ages, it is going to afford them the opportunity for making adaptations that help them with a couple of very important things. Number one, they're going to have a faster learning curve later on in life whenever they decide to learn any specific skill. What are specific skills? Kids are going to grow up and they're going to play sports. Kids are going to grow up and at some point they're going to want to train, right? Train in the gym. So you think about anything you do with your physicality, you learn how to do a deadlift, you learn how to do a squat, and you learn how to play football. All of these are different motor skills. These are things that you do with your body. These are skills that you have to learn. They have a certain learning curve. And the main difference for somebody who has not had a physical education experience and somebody who has had a physical education experience is going to be that this kid is going to have a very fast learning curve. They're going to pick things a lot faster. And that's because of there's really no one singular reason for why that happens. It's not like you teach somebody to crawl and climb jungle gyms and stuff and they just magically learn how to do a deadlift better than somebody else. But there are a lot of different factors that go into play here, right? Because when people have had exposure to all of these things, as a result of this, they grow robust, they become more robust, they have a high movement IQ. There's this concept of the perceptual motor landscape, right? Which is basically this conceptual landscape that exists in your perception, and any solution, any movement solution to any task is going to exist in this landscape. And since it is in your perception, all of it is really based on what things you are perceiving. So linking it back to our point about ecology and filling up the immediate environments of kids with different activities that afford them the opportunity to adapt to those activities. When kids have that experience, they have a very rich perceptual motor landscape, and we do not even need to complicate it with all these words. All we need to really think about is that it's very easy to understand that if a kid has been running, crawling, climbing and doing all of these things versus somebody who has been just sitting at home and not doing these things, these kids are going to have a better experience whenever they decide to pick up any activity or learn any skill. They're going to be robust. They're going to have a very rich perceptual motor landscape. They're going to have a very, very high movement IQ because they've built a foundation of years, and they would have built a foundation of years and years and years where they've been climbing, experimenting, failing forward, not going through all of these experiences only because it has been afforded to them, right? And it has been afforded to them because there were objects and entities and experiences placed in their immediate surrounding that helped them to adapt to those, and as a result build up a very high movement IQ, build up a lot of robustness, and eventually have very fast learning curves when they do decide to pick up learn specific skills. Because number one, one thing that I've noticed with a lot of kids that have been, I interact with a lot of parents and kids that come to classes, and you see a whole bunch of kids try out the things that we do in physical education, and not just kids, this goes for adults as well. I've had multiple interactions with adults as well. One thing that stands out in between people that have had a very movement wise a very rich upbringing versus somebody who has not had that, people who have not had that usually it is very easy and very natural for them to go into panic mode when they pick up these activities, versus somebody who has had a childhood, who has had an upbringing where their ecosystem and their immediate environment was just full of these activities. They do not really panic that much, that it's easier for them to absorb the negative experiences as well as the positive experiences, make something of it, draw from their past experiences, use their very high, very rich variable movement IQ, and then apply all of that and learn this new skill. Versus somebody who has just not had this experience, it's very, very hard for them to just get past that first stage of panic and then understand, what to do with the skill, how to learn it. And also they're not going to have a lot to draw from, because they have been deprived their, you think about their ecosystem growing up, that was not full of these things that afforded them. They were not afforded the opportunity to make these adaptations. They were not afforded the opportunity to, to cultivate this very high movement IQ of doing a whole bunch of things, of being able to climb anywhere they want, being able to crawl, being able to sprint, being able to run, compete, have negative experiences, and have acceptance for those negative experiences, learn how to move forward with positive experiences, all of those things. So that's the basis for why, you know why anybody should be doing physical education. So it's not about what is the correct age to get started, it's about why you should be getting started in physical education. And it's very simple. It helps you adapt and grow as a human being, right? It goes hand in hand with your human nature. That is, humans are going to adapt to the things in their surroundings. Now the onus is on you, parents and guardians, that, and for yourself as well, it completely depends on you. What are you filling up your environment with? What are you filling up your ecosystem with? Whatever you fill up your ecosystem with, you're going to adapt to that. If your ecosystem is, all that exists in your ecosystem is a television, a mobile, quick snacks, and all of these things, then you're going to adapt to that. And just sitting on a couch every single day, you're going to adapt to that. If your kids are out and they're, they are exposed to these things, and their immediate surrounding is full of swings, playground activities, and all of these things, you're going to adapt to that. So whatever is the takeaway here is that whatever you are as humans, you are adaptive creatures, and you are going to adapt to whatever you have in your immediate surroundings or your ecosystem. Now it depends on you. The onus is on you to pick what you want to, what objects and entities and experiences you want to place in your immediate surroundings and in your ecosystem. And that's what physical education does. It places things and entities and objects and experiences in kids and everybody's immediate surroundings, that helps them grow robust, that helps them build a very high movement IQ, which later on in life is going to help them become more exuberant, more expressive, more confident in their abilities, more, at ease with trying out different things. And, that's basically it. And eventually have just fast learning curves with whatever skill they decide to learn. Have a good experience, have a good life experience. Now, understand that I'm calling this physical education. I'm not saying training. I'm not saying that every single child of whatever age they are, 10, 8, 9, we have 8-year-olds coming to our training, we have 11-year-olds, we have, all the way up to 25, 28 years, 28-year-olds. But, and the training for everybody doesn't really look the same. It depends. I talked about layering in a post of mine, and I'm going to cover layering in the next episode as well. But I'm just going to give you a quick gist of it. And layering basically means that you need to create layers for people depending on where they are at life at that point. So, if people are coming to training who have already had a very, like we said, movement wise and exposure to physical activities wise, they've had a rich experience, their first layer is already created. If a kid is already playing a sport and going out and being exuberant, their first layer is already created. Layer 1 activities are basically physical expression activities, where you are just expressing your physicality, doing things with your, reacting, doing things like playing sports, dancing, doing anything with your body, performing a physical skill or things like that. Those are layer 1 activities. So if a kid is already coming from that background, you do not really need to create the first layer for them. What you need to do is you need to create a second layer that supports this first layer. You need to do layer 2 activities, and layer 2 activities is going to include your physical training and all of those things that helps you, support the layer 1 activities, that helps you support your sport. That's why people say that you got to train for your sport as well, right? Because in the first layer you're expressing, and when you do that, you understand where you're limited. When you go out and play a sport, you understand where exactly it is you are limited. And in a grander scheme of things, when you do layer 1 activities, the layer 1 activities are going to afford you the opportunity to understand where it is you're limited, and your limits basically become your constraint for growth. Because once you know your limit, you can create a second layer and you can train to basically improve your ceiling for those limits. And that when that happens, layer 2 supports that, and when that happens, that creates the constraints for your growth, right? When your limits improve, your abilities improve, and your layer 1 abilities, your layer 1 experience improves. Then you gotta have a third layer for everybody as well, and third layer is just basic health and wellness, where you're objectively looking at your organism. And I talked about this yesterday as well. It's not just about the things that you do, it is like objectively about you as well. you, the organism, right? What are you about? Is everything working well inside? That's where you got to look at food. That's where you got to look at the correct supplementation. That's where you got to look at the correct nutrients coming in, sleep, lifestyle, relationships, mindset, and all of those things. So you got to have these layers, right? And we'll talk about this in a later episode, but that's what you do. So it's not about at what age should anybody get started. You just take a person, you get understand the context. Do they have a layer one created? Do they have do they have the layer two created? If they do not have the layer one created, which is basically 7, 8, 9 year olds, some of them are not going to have had that experience of being expressive, being exuberant, being playing and being exposed to all these playground games. So that becomes a training for them. You just create the first layer for them. So it doesn't mean that an 8-year-old is going to train like a 20-year-old, right? Because a 20-year-old might have already had the first layer created for them, right? Or life might have created the layer for them. We'll talk about all of these things are very important to understand. We'll talk about it in the next episode. But so training for an 8-year-old is not going to look like training for a 20-year-old. So you do not need to worry about that. You do not need to. I know a lot of you just visualize that 8-year-olds going in a gym and doing bench press, and that's a weird visual. But that's not just what physical education is, because training is a part of physical education. And now you understand that there is going to be a need for training when the first layer is created. But if the first layer is not created, you just take the kid and you help them create the first layer. Just help them go out and have these experiences, right? Fill up their ecosystem with the things that you want them to adapt to, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's it for today's episode, and I'll see you guys for the next one.